All right, good day, good morning, good evening, good night to you, wherever and whenever you're watching me. This is your brother and friend Maurice. And what are we talking about? Well, we are continuing our study on the new cosmos, but we are looking specifically at Genesis chapter 1. And we're going to learn that formless and void is not what you think. You're watching the new Kosmos Videocast.
This is the new Kosmos Videocast. You've never heard it like this anywhere. Welcome.
We are continuing our new series of studies on the new cosmos, the new creature, the new heavens and earth. And we are in our 5th video. And to see the previous 4 videos, I will put the link to the playlist on the top right-hand corner of this video. Or you may visit the new Kosmos Videocast channel and look in the new Cosmos playlist. So we are continuing to look at Genesis 1. And our title today is Formless and Void is not what you think. Formless and void is not what you think. But before we get into our topic, we're just going to do a brief review of the previous study. And what we learned in the previous study is that Genesis 1 was not written in a vacuum. It was not written yesterday. It was not written in our 21st century, neither the 20th century, right? It was written more than 3,000 years ago. And it was written in that time period to the people of that time using their worldview. And it needs to be understood in that context and in that worldview. And also, I might add, according to what we have learned, what we have been enlightened through the ministry of Jesus and his apostles, right? So that means we need to examine the scriptures to see how the language of Genesis was used in other parts of the Hebrew scriptures so that we can have the right understanding of the Genesis creation. And we need to also disavow this or get rid of this perspective that Genesis was intended to give a science lesson. Okay, that Genesis is a scientifically accurate narrative, okay? Because it was not given in the first place for that purpose, all right? And as we go through these studies, I hope that you will begin to see that, because I know how it is when you have learned something one way and you are certain about it, and then you meet another perspective. Of course, in the beginning, you will be challenging everything, and everything will seem strange and new and even wrong. But if you have been studying with me for a while now, you know that whenever I bring a teaching, I'm not bringing a speculation. I'm going to go through scripture after scripture after scripture, right? So that you may see, even though you may not be convinced, or at least you may not accept my perspective, you cannot doubt that the scriptures that I have brought surely are saying what or support the conclusion that I have come to, right? And that's all I ask, right? You're free to disagree. Let's do so as Christian brothers and sisters, so that when we are reading the Genesis creation account, we need to understand it in their context of the people that Moses, who is acknowledged to have written that account, he was writing it to the early Israelites. Okay? And understand what was their circumstances and why they would have needed to have a Genesis narrative given them, okay? So that I have recommended that we should look past, or we should begin to look past the physical depiction of the heavens and earth as given in the Genesis narrative to what may have been a spiritual reality which God now would be communicating, because when we look at Genesis chapter 1, it says the Spirit was moving, right? The Spirit was moving. So, which means that alerts us that this would be a spiritual work that God was doing. Wherever the Spirit of God is, that means God is accomplishing a spiritual work. All right? And also, we know that Moses wrote under the inspiration of the Spirit. Okay? So that means Moses' mind was being inspired, right? But then the words that he wrote were his words. And he now had to, so to speak, transfer what he received in the Spirit into words which would the Hebrew people would be able to read, okay? And it had so he had to put it in their context, right? And I gave the example before that when Jesus spoke spiritual things to the Israelites, he had to put it in their context. So Jesus would talk about sheep and goats and shepherds and kings and kingdoms, right? Because that was what their context was. If Jesus was speaking to us today, he would use things of our context. He would talk about the smartphones and vehicles and airplanes and ships and skyscrapers, right? Automation. That's the world we live in, right? He would use our language, right? Because we already have, when we use a word, that word in it has all these meanings that are generally understood. Even though the word probably doesn't even, if you look at the literal word, right? If you look at the literal word, it probably is not even close to what we understand it as to mean, right? So if we look at a word like download, right? I'm going to download a file. Now, download. But actually, we're not dealing with anything of weight. We are dealing with a digital file. A digital file download, and it's not actually downloading into any physical space in our home. It's on the computer. Right? But the word download, if you look at it literally, it implies there is some sort of weight that is coming down from somewhere, when that's not the case, right? Similarly, when you read words in the Hebrew narrative now, you gotta understand them, how they were used by the Hebrew people. Even though you know the literal meaning of a word, it's not necessarily used literally. All right, so all of these things, I hope we can have this exciting and interesting journey through Genesis 1, and as well the Bible in general. All of these principles I'm mentioning generally are the hermeneutic for reading the Bible. Okay, so let's get into our topic, right? So we are talking about formless and void. Okay, formless and void. And so let me just establish some things which I mentioned in previous videos, but we're gonna go back to them just so that we can have a bridge to link to what I will be talking about today. So Hebrews 1 verse 10. Okay, let's look at that. Hebrews 1 verse 10, right? Because I need to they say repetition is the mother of learning, right? So I know that many of us, or a few of us, or some of us, or whatever the percentage of us, have not really grasped what I'm putting down, what I'm putting out, right? And so I need to repeat certain things. And maybe because these videos that I'm doing are over 1 hour long, maybe there are certain parts you may not have seen or skipped, right? So I need to do some repetition. Hebrews 1, verse 10. It says, "And you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands." Okay? So we can all agree the apostle is actually quoting Psalm. I can't remember which Psalm he's quoting, but he's quoting a Psalm here, right? Let me see if I can pick that up. Psalm 102. Okay, he's quoting from Psalm 102. But anyway, so he's quoting Psalm 102, and it's speaking about the heavens and the earth. Okay? You laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. Okay? God worked the heavens, laid the foundation of the earth, and the word earth here is actually it's the Greek word ge, right? Which also means, and most likely means, land. Okay? Because the Bible is another thing that I need to help us to understand. The Bible is Israel-centric. Okay? So when it's talking about the earth, it's talking about Israel's earth. So therefore, we need to understand it as Israel's land. Okay? When it's talking about the earth, it's not talking about whether if you believe the earth is a disc or a globe or whatever. It's not talking about that. It's talking about Israel's earth, Israel's land. Okay? Or whatever nation, their land. Okay? Generally, the region. Okay? That's what that word is. And you'll see that also, if I put the lexicon up, you see it says there, it's the Greek word ge. In the Hebrew, it's eretz, but they both have similar meaning. Arable land, so notice it's land, the ground, the earth as a standing place, so it's a place, the mainland as opposed to sea or water. Then it says the earth as a whole, but there's very little, I believe, evidence in the scripture that this word is actually used as the earth as a whole, because the Bible was never concerned about the earth as a whole, like every single nation on the earth, right? It was always concerned with Israel, or the covenant people of God, and the nations that are mentioned are those which have some sort of connection to the covenant people or to Israel. Okay? The other nations who are far away on the other side were not mentioned because they had no connection, no communication. They had nothing to do with the covenant people of God or Israel. The only reason you would find like, for example, Mesopotamia or Ur of the Chaldees mentioned is because Abraham came from that region. Okay? The only reason why you would have all of the Hittites and the Girgashites and all of these ites mentioned is because they were the enemies of Israel or of God, and they were the people who were in the land that Israel was being inserted to, right? These are the only reason why these nations are mentioned, because of Israel or because of God's covenant people, whether it's because of Noah, whether it's because of Joseph, whether it's because of Jacob. That's why these nations get mentioned, right? So the earth as a whole is I don't think that there's such a use of the word gay. Then the earth as opposed to the heavens, okay, meaning the land as opposed to the sky, right? Because when you have the earth and the heavens being used in juxtaposition, it usually is speaking of the land and the skies, okay? And the inhabited earth, again, the inhabited earth primarily starts with Israel and the surrounding nations in which Israel may have been dispersed. That would be the inhabited earth. Okay? The Bible was not concerned, Bible was not concerned about nations who had nothing to do with God's people, right? The abode of men and animals, a country, land enclosed with fixed boundaries, etc. So you notice the majority of applications of this word has to do with a land, okay? Not the earth as in the globe or the entire world. I know I have some flat earth viewers, so I need to find a word that is not controversial. So some people don't like me to say globe, right? So I'll have to, maybe you can suggest what word I can use that can be a compromise between a flat earth and a globe earth. What word should I say, okay? Anyway, so that's the land, right? So let's get back to the Bible. So you, Lord, laid the foundation of the land in the beginning, and the heavens or the skies are the work of your hands. Now, notice verse 11 now, right? So from verse 10, we all agree this is talking about the heavens and the earth, okay? Look at verse 11. They will perish, okay? They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years have no end. So here we have now the heavens and the earth likened to a garment, right? They are likened to a garment that will perish, that will fade away, that will wear out. Okay? So let's start thinking. Is this heavens and earth now speaking of the material heavens and earth? Right? Is it speaking about this planet that we are on, and the solar system, and the Milky Way? Is it speaking that they will wear out and perish, and God will roll them up and replace them? Well, I made the point in a previous video that this same language of the heavens and earth wearing out like a garment, right, and perishing is the same language used in the same book, Hebrews, but later on in chapter 8, verse 13, to speak of the old covenant. So let's go there. Hebrews 8, verse 13. In speaking of an old covenant, he makes the first one obsolete, and what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. So here we have the covenant, right, being, according to the King James, waxing old and ready to vanish away, right? The covenant is now presented as a garment that is growing old, just like the heavens and earth in chapter 1, verse 10 and 11 and 12, which was waxing old, growing old, ready to vanish away. As a garment, here we have the covenant growing old and ready to vanish away. So we have a connection, not made by me now, but made by the apostle under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, between the heavens and the earth and the old covenant. Right? Now watch this. I'm going to go to Ezekiel 16. Right? I'm going to Ezekiel 16 and look at this now. I'm going to read verse 3 just to get the context here. Verse 3 it says, and say, thus says the Lord God to Jerusalem, right? So God is instructing Ezekiel to speak to Jerusalem, meaning the old covenant people of God, right? Your origin and your birth are of the land of Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite, your mother was a Hittite, okay? This is speaking to the old covenant people of God. Jerusalem, Israel. So let's continue now in verse 8. Look what he says to Jerusalem. When I passed by you again and saw you, behold, you were at the age for love, and I spread the corner of my what? My garment. Okay? Now, remember we just came from Hebrews, in which the heavens and the earth were like a garment, in which the old covenant was a garment. Okay? He said, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your nakedness and made my vow to you and entered into a covenant with you. So notice now, in Ezekiel, covenant and garment are being linked. God spreading his covenant, spreading his garment over Israel, and then he entered into a covenant with Israel. Okay? And that covenant was to cover their nakedness. Right? Then we are told now in Hebrews chapter 1, which is quoting Psalm 102, that the heavens and earth were like a garment. Right? And so we're seeing here a garment was to cover a body. And that body was the people of God. Right? The old covenant people of God. And they were covered with the heavens and the earth. So which means, right there and then, all our arguments about flat earth, globe earth, rakia, and all of these things, we need to throw them out the window. We need to get rid of them because that's not the focus of Genesis 1. Genesis 1 is about heavens and earth, which were made to cover God's people. And that heavens and earth was going to fade away. Was going to grow old. It was going to perish. God was going to change it and replace it with a new heavens and earth, which is the new covenant, which would be a new means of covering his people. Right? So that's why I alerted my viewers in the previous video that let's move past the physical depiction and start looking for the spiritual and the covenantal. But some folk still, this like Nicodemus, right? We still want to debate the scientific, okay, as to whether there were asteroids coming through the rakia and the windows of heaven and all of that. Science. I am not here to talk science. The Bible was not given as a science textbook. I'm here to talk spiritual things and covenantal relationships from the Spirit, the Holy Spirit inspired thoughts of God. All right? All right? No, I don't want to be too hard on anybody, right? And if I'm coming across as hard, I'm not. I'm a very loving person, easygoing person, right? And I have to always remember, I was once where you are now. When I first heard this way, or when I was introduced to this way of looking at Genesis 1, I was like, nah. Nah. I couldn't get it. I could not get it. You know? But it is verses like Hebrews 1, what we just read there, that the heavens and the earth were a garment. Ezekiel 16, the covenant was a garment. Hebrews 8, the covenant was wearing out. Right? Then is when I begin to say, wow. Wow. And again, as we go through, we're not going through in this study. We're going to go through, maybe in the next study, I don't know, maybe within the next 2 studies, we're going to go through the 6 days. Right? And then you could start going through them now. And ask yourself, what was the material being produced on this day? Look at day 1. Ask yourself, what was being originated on that day? Was anything made that was not already there? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. Ask yourself as you go through each one of those days, was there anything being originated? Or was there stuff that was being organized? Was there stuff that was being defined? Was there stuff that was being given a purpose in serving the people of God? Right? Ask yourself those questions so that by the time we get around to doing that study, you'll be prepared. Okay? Right? So we got to get rid of the Nicodemus focus. Nicodemus was stumped on how a man is born again. Shall he enter back into his mother's womb? And Jesus did use the word born. Okay? So Nicodemus used the word born. But Jesus wasn't talking about biological birth. He was talking about spiritual and covenantal birth. Right? And again, certain translations of that has it as born from above. That's even worse. Because Nicodemus will be like, how can you be born from above? Right? Shall I ascend into the sky and be born and come down back? Right? But Jesus was not talking about biological birth. Right? So let us get into the mindset. The scripture says, let this mind be in you which was in Christ. Start thinking like Jesus. Right? Start thinking like Jesus. So the heavens and earth that Hebrews 1 spoke about is a garment that was a garment that would wear out, perish, and be changed. I am contending that was the old covenant world. Okay? That was the old covenant world with the old covenant laws, the old covenant precepts, statutes, priesthood, temple, sacrifices, ordinances, everything for the old covenant. Okay? And that grew old in the time of the apostles. It was growing old in the time of the apostles, and it was ready to vanish away. And that is why the apostle wrote, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature, he is a new creation. And if he is a new creation, he has to be a creature of a new heavens and earth. Again, meaning if that new creature who is in Christ is not a biologically new creature, then it's a spiritually new creature. So if it's a spiritually new creature, it has to come from a spiritual creation. As Jesus said, that which is born of flesh is flesh, that which is born of spirit is spirit. And we know the creature that Jesus was talking about is born of the spirit. So if he's born of the spirit, now he's in a spirit creation, and therefore the heavens and earth of that creation has to be a spiritual heavens and earth, which means it's not material creation that Jesus was talking about. And if he was not talking about the material creation, he's talking about a spiritual creation. Therefore, he's also talking about a spiritual heavens and earth. Well, what was the origin of that spiritual heavens and earth? Of that old heavens and earth? What was the origin of it? I'm contending that Genesis 1 is the narrative of that spiritual heavens and earth. Not the material heavens and earth. Yes, it is given using the natural creation language, right? But again, as we go through the narrative, so please be patient. Or as I said, you go through the narrative and ask yourself the questions. Okay? You go through the narrative and ask yourself the questions, right? But there may be some information that you don't have that I have, which when you hear the information that I will bring, that may also kind of shift your perspective and understanding as well, right? So the old and new covenants, or the first and the second covenants, were likened to garments that clothe the covenant bodies, God's covenant bodies. So you had Adam to Moses, that's the old covenant body. Right? The body of Moses, the body of Adam, that's the old covenant body. Then you have the body of Christ. That's the new covenant body. And they are clothed with these heavens and earth, these covenant relationships between heaven and earth. Right? Now, if you begin to see it like that, you're on your way to understanding what this new heavens and earth that Jesus and his disciples were predicting, were heralding, and which they said would happen within that generation to whom they were ministering. And in that way now, you can preach the coming of Christ, you can preach the new heavens and earth without making Jesus and his apostles liars. Right? Because right now, the modern church is saying, well, we're looking for the new heavens and earth still. That means you're making Peter a liar. You're making Jesus a liar. You're making Paul a liar. You're making John a liar. Because all of those men preached the new heavens and earth as coming to pass in their generation. So we cannot honestly be preaching new heavens and earth in 2024. 50 generations later. We can't be seriously saying that we are still looking for a new heavens and earth. We can't be. We better just, close up shop. Nobody who believes or claims to believe the word of Christ and claims to believe the words of his apostles, inspired words of his apostles, should buy that nonsense. There must be a review, because we have to come to a point to say, well, look, we are 50 generations later. How is it that there is no new heavens and earth? There must be something wrong with our understanding. Instead, we say, no, we have the right understanding. It was Jesus and the apostles who meant something else. You see how arrogant we are? We are very arrogant. We would want to impose, you call that now, doctrinal colonialism, right? We want to impose our scientific and modern understanding of the heavens and earth, right? Whether we have a flat earth view or a globe earth view, we want to take that now and push it back on Jesus and the apostles. So that, the material earth has to be destroyed. The material heavens have to be destroyed before we can believe what they say. But I love how Jesus anticipated all of that, because he said, there will be some standing here, meaning in the time when he was talking to the disciples and the crowd that was with around them. He told them, some of you will not taste death before you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And then he says, all these things will be fulfilled in that generation to whom he was speaking to. And he also says, what else will be fulfilled? He said, the elements of the law, the jots and tittles, the stoichion of the old covenant law would be fulfilled. And when that old covenant law was fulfilled, the heavens and earth would pass away. Right? That's what Jesus said. You can't change that. Right? So, that's where we are. So now let us go into, that was an extended introduction and review, right? Let us continue now looking at the Genesis 1 narrative, okay? So we are Genesis 1, verse 2. Genesis 1, verse 2, okay? And so it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. That's Genesis 1:1. We know that in the Young's literal translation, it says, in the beginning of God's preparing the heavens and earth, the earth had existed waste and void. So notice in verse 1 and 2, it tells you that there was already earth, there was already water, because it says, and the darkness is on the face of the deep, so that's the deep water, and the Spirit of God. So here we have God about to do a spiritual work, right? The Spirit of God was fluttering on the face of the waters. We have the concordant literal version telling us, yet the earth became chaos and vacant, right? And we know that this word earth, the erets here, the Hebrew word erets, is the equivalent of the Greek ge, which most likely is referring to land. This is not referring to the entire globe or planet or whatever. Habitation. It's referring to a region on the earth, right? The land became a chaos and vacant, and darkness was on the surface of the submerged chaos. We went over that in the previous studies to show that darkness does not necessarily mean there was no sun and there was no moon and there was no stars. Because the fact of the matter, if the earth was already there, the earth as a planet exists in the heavens, the celestial heavens. Right? So just because there's darkness, that doesn't mean there is no sun and moon, because it tells you in verse, let's go back to the English Standard Version. It tells you clearly in verse 5, and there was evening and there was morning. And the words evening and morning is boker and Arab, I think. Evening is Arab and morning is boker. And that means the sunrise and the sunset. The sunset and the sunrise. Okay? So there was sunset and there was sunrise the first day. So if you have a situation where you have heavy cloud cover, the place will be dark. But that doesn't mean there's no sun. If you have a lot of smoke blotting out the sun, that doesn't mean that because there's darkness, that doesn't mean there's no sun. Okay, but what we want to concentrate on, we're gonna talk a bit more about that later on in another study. What we want to talk about here is verse 2. And the earth or the land was without form and void. Okay, without form and void. The Hebrew words here are tohu, and bohu. Okay, without form or formless, tohu, and void, bohu. Okay. Now, when we as modern, we come into the Bible with our scientific mindset. Okay, we come into the Bible with all this narrative that has been given to us from since we were children of how the earth was created and so on, right? So we actually coming with an assumption that this was like some sort of mass of whirling gases, this kind of like Big Bang kind of scenario, right? And let me see if I have yes, let me look at the Matthew Henry Bible commentary here, right? Let me show you Matthew Henry's understanding of what Genesis 1 verse 2 is speaking about. The earth was without form and void. Look at Matthew Henry, right? And again, I always have to make this disclaimer. I am not ridiculing the writer of the commentary, because I have huge respect for these men. I mean, I have benefited a lot from their work, right? But I'm just showing you this is most likely how many of us, myself included, until I began looking at it from this other perspective. This was generally speaking my understanding of this formlessness and void of the earth, right? It says a chaos was the first matter. It is here called the earth, though the earth properly taken was not made till the third day, because it did most resemble that which afterwards was called earth, mere earth, destitute of its ornament, such a heavy, unwieldy mass. Okay? So we're looking at the planet now like it's like a blob of, it says a heavy, unwieldy mass was it. It is also called the deep, both for its vastness and because the waters which were afterwards separated from the earth were now mixed with it. This immense mass of matter was out of which all bodies, even the firmament and visible heavens themselves, were afterward produced by the power of the eternal world. Okay. So Matthew Henry is saying, look, you had this blob of water, liquid, and earth mixed up. Nothing was solid. All the elements that would create things on the earth as well as in the heavens came out of that. Okay? So that's like another form of Big Bang, right? Everything came out of that blob. Boom. And that's what Genesis 1:2 was saying. But when you look at Genesis 1 and 1:2, all of this was there before verse 3. Is verse 3, and God said, let there be light. Okay? So before the creation narrative began, where we have, generally speaking, the day one activities, you had this earth was there. You had water there. So we cannot say that the Genesis 1 narrative is speaking about the origin of stuff, because stuff was already there. All right? Now, let us now take a biblical approach to understanding, to see if we can understand this term without form and void, okay? So, to do that, let me just take you to our interlinear here, all right? Genesis 1, verse 2. It says there, now the earth was formless, and here's the word tohu, okay? Tohu, you see in it? And the word there is void, bohu. So the phrase which is translated in the English Bible as formless and void, or without form and void, is remember you're reading from the right to the left when you're reading Hebrew, right? So it's so without form and void is the Hebrew tohu wabohu. That's the phrase. This exact phrase is found one more time in the Bible, right? One more time in the Bible in Jeremiah 4, right? It's found in Jeremiah 4, verse 23. The exact phrase. Okay? So, here's Jeremiah. I looked at the earth, and again, that's the erets, so it's the land. I looked at the land, and behold, it was, notice now, tohu wabohu. Okay? Jeremiah looked at the land, and it was formless and empty. Tohu wabohu. What was Jeremiah talking about? Jeremiah was talking about the aftermath of the fall of Jerusalem circa 600 BC, 600 years before Christ, when Nebuchadnezzar and the armies of Babylon, the Chaldean armies, came through Jerusalem, right? Burning, destroying, killing, pillaging, and then exiling, taking prisoners and captives and carrying them away to Babylon. The aftermath of that, Jeremiah looks on the land and he says, it is tohu wabohu. Right? So let's go to Jeremiah 4. Let's go and read it. Let's go and read it now in our Bible. Let's go back to the Bible. So here we are, Jeremiah chapter 4 and down to verse 23, right? This is how the Hebrew people understood tohu wabohu. Right? Not how we understand. We want to impose our science on Genesis. We want to see how a spirit-inspired prophet uses these words, and if it's the same spirit that inspired Jeremiah, it will be the same spirit that inspired Moses, right? Jeremiah said, I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, right? Tohu wabohu. And to the heavens, now Jeremiah looks to the heavens, and they had what? No light. Right? Remember, Jeremiah is looking at the aftermath of the armies of Babylon having come through and destroyed. And we're going to look at the account of that as well, right? Which is in, I think it's in Chronicles or Kings. We're going to look at it, however, right? So he says the heavens had no light. So where did the sun go? Where did the stars go? Where did the moon go? And the earth if we are thinking this is the entire planet, well, where did everybody go? Where did everyone go for the earth to become without form and void? If that is how we are thinking tohu wabohu means, right? He said, I looked on the mountains and behold, they were quaking and the hills moved to and fro. I looked and behold, there was no man. Oh, well, where did everybody go? Where did everybody go? And all the birds of the air had fled. Right? I looked and behold the fruitful land. The fruitful what? Land. Same word, erets. Right? Same word, erets. Let's see. The fruitful land was a wilderness, was a desert, and all its cities were laid in ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. Oh. Oh. Jeremiah was talking about the judgment of God upon Israel as a result of their first temple abominations. The first temple, which was Solomon's temple, the abominations committed by the priest in the first temple. God sent Nebuchadnezzar and the armies of Babylon, destroyed the city, destroyed the temple, destroyed the palaces. For thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be made desolate. Right? Let's look at the word. It's the erets. Right? The erets. Now the translators would put earth, they would put land there, right? Because they said, oh, we understand this is talking about not the whole earth. We understand the context is the land, the holy land of Israel, right? Yeah. But then when they in verse 23, right? When they in verse 23, look what they put. They put the earth. Sorry, thought I had the Bible up there. In verse 23, they put the earth, but it's the same word, erets, land. I looked on the land, and the land was without form and void. The heavens, they had no light. Over that land, not over the entire planet. Over that land, there was no light. Why? Because most likely all the smoke. Right? But also, now this is something you have to understand with the Hebrew prophets. They connected the physical with the spiritual. Right? They connected the physical with the spiritual. So that when it says it was dark and they had no light, yeah, physically it was dark and the sun was obscured. But also it was dark spiritually. Right? They connected because remember these are spirit-inspired words. So not only the physical darkness was a sign that they were in spiritual darkness. Okay? So what Jeremiah is talking about here is not some apocalyptic earth-ending event where the whole planet is destroyed and everybody is wiped off. And no, he's talking about when Babylon came through Jerusalem and destroyed Solomon's temple. That's what he's talking about, right? And so Jeremiah's understanding of tohu, wabohu, is not the way we understand it. Okay? Right? Jeremiah. Now let's look at some of the things that Jeremiah talked about, right? But before before we get into that, let me just read to you. Let me just take us to 2 Kings 25:8, right? 2 Kings 25:8. This is the literal account of what happened. This is what Jeremiah saw in his spiritual vision. This is now the actual thing that happened. It says, verse 8, in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, that was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the bodyguard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. So it just gives a date, historical record of when this thing happened and who was the king and who was the general leading the army. So the king was Nebuchadnezzar, the general was Nebuzaradan. Okay, so they came to Jerusalem, and so that would be Nebuzaradan, under the authority of Nebuchadnezzar, burned the house of the Lord. This is Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, the Babylonian army, and the king's house, right? And all the houses of Jerusalem, every great house, he burned down. So that's a lot of smoke. That's a lot of smoke. Every house burned. The temple burned. The king's house burned. The great houses burned. That's a lot of smoke. What do you think that's going to do to the sky? It's going to make it dark. It's going to blot out the sun. Then there will be darkness over that land. There will be the heavens, as Jeremiah saw it, would not be giving any light. Physically. But also, there is a spiritual darkness as well, right? Verse 10. And all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls around Jerusalem, and the rest of the people who were left in the city, and the deserters who had deserted to the king of Babylon, together with the rest of the multitude, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried into exile. That's why Jeremiah said, I looked and I saw no man. Right? That doesn't mean that everybody on the whole wide earth as a planet had disappeared. No, just the people in Jerusalem. They were carried off to exile. Right? And even in that case, it says, but the captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. All right? It says, and the pillars of bronze that were in the house of the Lord, the stands of the bronze sea. You remember when it talked about the foundations of the earth? Jeremiah? Let me see if we could go back there. I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and the hills moved to and fro. Okay? Now, in the Hebrew mind, the earth was supported by two giant pillars, which were the foundations of the earth, right? And whenever there was like an earthquake or anything like that, or any disaster that happened, it was as if God had swayed the earth on these two pillars, so that it was said that the hills were moving and the earth was quaking, right? Because the earth was in their mind, in their science, if you want to put it that way, in their science, the earth was on two pillars, founded on two pillars. I'm sorry I don't have the text at hand, but I'll bring it up later on, because we're going to get into that later on in studies to talk about that, right? But so when 2 Kings now speaks about the pillars of bronze that were in the house of the Lord. These pillars of bronze were depicting the pillars that the earth or the land were founded on. All right? So all of that, it says, these pillars and the stands on the bronze sea that were in the house of the Lord, the Chaldeans broke in pieces. So in other words, it's like the foundations of the earth were removed. All right? They took away the pots and so on and so forth, right? You couldn't read the rest. Okay? So understand what Jeremiah saw in vision, that there was no man. The land was tohu wabohu. What did he mean when he used that word? Huh? What did he mean? We will continue looking at Genesis 1 when I come back. Okay, so we are back and we are looking at Genesis 1 verse 2, where the earth at the beginning of the 6 days, it was, according to the modern translations, it was without form and void, or formless and void. The Hebrew words used there, tohu wabohu. We are looking at how Jeremiah used that exact same phrase, tohu wabohu, and he was speaking about the destruction that had come from the Babylonian armies coming through Jerusalem, destroying the city, burning the houses, burning the temple, burning the palaces. And Jeremiah says, oh, the heavens gave no light. There was no man. Okay? So let's see if we can go from the Bible narrative to see what was Jeremiah describing, right? Remember, Jeremiah says, he said that the heavens gave no light. Okay? In verse 23, I looked on the earth, which we understand, the land. Sorry, put back up the Bible there. I looked on the land, and behold, it was without form and void. That's tohu wabohu, same phrase used in Genesis 1 verse 2. And to the heavens, or to the skies, they had no light, most likely because of all the fire. The palace, the temple, the houses, all of the houses in Jerusalem were on fire. Smoke would blot out the sun. That's one reason. I looked on the mountains, they were quaking. Because why? And the hills moved to and fro. Why? Because the foundations of the earth, the covenant land, was being shaken. We went to 2 Kings. The columns in the temple were disassembled, were broken down. Okay? I looked, and behold, there was no man. Why? And the birds of the air had fled. Why did he mention man and birds of the air? Why didn't he talk about the dogs in the street? Why didn't he talk about the snakes? Why didn't he talk about, other animals? Why man and birds? Right? Because man, earthbound, birds fly in the air, right? Birds fly in the heavens. Man is on the earth, right? We're going to talk about that. Okay? The fruitful land was desert. Okay? Fruitful land, that's a reference back to Eden. Okay? So we have here a what is called a decreation. Right? It's like what Genesis 1 is talking about, but in reverse. Okay? It's a decreation. Now, let's look at the heavens giving no light. Now, I remember I said, because of all the smoke, it blots out the sun, right? But now, the prophet now, being inspired by the word, by the Spirit of God, the prophet Jeremiah, being inspired by the Spirit of God, said the heavens gave no light. That's in verse 23, right? He looked to the heavens, they had no light. Okay? So, yes, you had all this smoke blotting out the sun. Now, Jeremiah sees that, and he sees spiritually also the heavens had no light. So let's look at Exodus 27 verse 20, for example, right? Exodus 27 verse 20, because I'm going to introduce you now to the concept of the priesthood of the heavens. Okay? The priesthood of the heavens. You remember in Genesis 1, it tells you that the birds were to fly in the midst of the heavens, right? Okay. Now, verse 20, Exodus 27:20, right? Look what God told when they were building, when the people of Israel, having come out of Egypt, and they were beginning their sojourn through the wilderness to the promised land. God gave the instruction on how to build the tabernacle. Okay, the tabernacle was this portable building, if you want to put it that way. It's a portable building, and in it was divided 2 compartments or apartments. In the first apartment, there was to be this lamp. It says, "You shall command the people of Israel that they bring you pure beaten oil for the light." Okay? That a lamp may regularly be set to burn in the tent of meeting, right? So in this building, or this tent, as I said, there was the 2 compartments. The bigger one was called the holy place, and the smaller one was called the most holy place. In that building, there was to be a lamp that was continually burning. It was to never go out. That light was to never be extinguished, right? But when we just read the account in 2 Kings, you notice, I don't think I really went back down that to show you that, but let me see if I get it back. 2 Kings was what chapter? 25, right? So let's go back to 2 Kings 25. Because you remember, this lamp, this light, was to always be burning in the temple. Right? 2 Kings 25:8. When Nebuchadnezzar came through, when Nebuzaradan came through Jerusalem, look what happened. Okay, we know that he burned down everything, right? But look what it says here now. And they took away the pots and shovels and snuffers on the dishes for incense and all the vessels of bronze used in the temple service. So notice they're raiding the temple. The fire pans and the bowls, what was of gold, the captain of guard took away as gold. What was of silver, right? And the 2 pillars and everything, right? Everything. They raided the temple. Okay? So that means the lamp that was to be the light, the eternal light in that temple, was also taken. So the light in the heavens, the light in the heavens was put out. That's why Jeremiah said, and the heavens gave no light. Because why? The temple sanctuary was the priesthood, was the heavens of the priesthood, right? The sanctuary in the temple was the heavens of the priesthood. They were the birds that flew in the air. That's why Jeremiah says, I saw no, the birds, they had fled. The priesthood had fled. Right? The priesthood had fled. The light in the temple had gone out. Okay? Now look again. Revelation 21. Okay? Revelation 21 is telling you now about the new temple, right? The new temple in the new heavens and earth. Okay? Revelation 21, 22. It says there, John speaking, he says, and I saw no temple in the city, for its temple, so he's going to describe the new temple. Okay? So there was the old temple, which was the one that we just read about, like Solomon's temple. And then after Solomon's temple, there was Zerubbabel's temple, which became known as Herod's temple. That was the temple in the time of Jesus, right? But after that one was destroyed as well, the second temple was destroyed as well, we know in the year 70. Then John is now seeing another temple. It's just this temple, it says, is the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb. So it's a relationship between God the Father and his Son with his people, right? That's the heaven and earth again. Okay. And the city had no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it its light, and its lamp is the lamp. So in this temple, in this new temple now, Christ is the light, and his light is the glory of God. And so that lamp could never be put out. So you're understanding now, the light that was in the first or the material temples of the first covenant were typical. They were symbolic of, they were allegorical of the true light, which is Christ reflecting the glory of his Father. And that is why they were not supposed to be put out, because Christ's light will never go out. Right? That's why I'm telling you. So when you're reading these things now, don't stick with the firmament and the rakia and the this and the that. No, go past that. Go behind that to the Spirit, and you'll find Christ there. You'll find Christ behind it. Okay, so Jeremiah says the heavens gave no light. Why? Because the light in the temple, which is the heavens of the priesthood, that light was out. Okay? The ministry of the priesthood had fled, and the priesthood were they who brought light to Israel. Right? That lamp in Solomon's temple, in the wilderness sanctuary, that and in Zerubbabel's temple, that indicated that God's light was in the covenant world. God was with his people, right? Giving them light through the ministry of the priest in the temple, right? Therefore, when the Babylonians, as Jeremiah saw, when he said, yeah, the land became tohu wabohu, right? The land became tohu wabohu. Why? Because the temple was destroyed. The light was put out. The heavens had no light. Because why? There were no priests to minister on behalf of God. There were no priests to teach the law of God. The ministry of the temple was terminated. All right? So there was no man. Right? Ezekiel 22:30. Now, literally, remember they were exiles. Jerusalem was exiled to Babylon. That's where Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys, when you read about that, that was during that time. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And we know those were their Babylonian names, right? I think I can't remember their Hebrew names right about now. Anyway, but during that time, Jerusalem was tohu wabohu, without form and void, and there was no man there, even though there were some poor people left there to work the land. Right? So when it says there was no man, there is another meaning, which we will find in Ezekiel 22:30. Right? Ezekiel 22:30. Okay, well, we need to wrap up now because we're over 1 hour. But anyway, Ezekiel 22:30. Okay, let's go down to verse 30. It says there, God speaking. God said, I sought for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found none. Notice that? You remember now, Jeremiah sees destruction, and as that destruction, he says, there was no man. There was no man. Again, Ezekiel is seeing destruction, and he says, there is no man. Right? God is saying, I will destroy the land. Same contemporary of Jeremiah. Now Ezekiel is a contemporary of Jeremiah. Right? God says, I'm going to bring destruction on Jerusalem because why? There is no man. I sought for a man. So who is he actually seeking for? He's seeking for a mediator. He's seeking for an intercessor between God and Israel. But he says, I found none. So who are the intercessors? The priesthood. Right? The priesthood. So you notice the priesthood were functioning as between man and God. They were between human and divine. They were between earthly and heavenly, just like Jesus. Jesus was Son of God and Son of Man. Right? That makes him the mediator of the new covenant. The priesthood of the old covenant temple, they were also sons of God and sons of men. I bet you never heard that anywhere. The priesthood was sons of God and sons of men. Right? You read it in the Psalms. Psalm says, know you not that you are gods? And that you are the sons of the Most High? So what? They were sons of, he says, you will die like men. So they were sons of men and they were sons of God, the priesthood. Right? And they were the men that God was seeking, but the priesthood had become corrupt. If you read Ezekiel chapter 9, they were idol worshippers. They had secret idols in their chambers. Right? So they could not be used by God to mediate for the people of Israel. There were no men. That's why the destruction came upon Jerusalem. Because they themselves were corrupt and they were not teaching the people. They were not giving light to Israel. So there was darkness over Israel. Isaiah said there was darkness, gross darkness over this people. Right? So you had physical darkness on the day of destruction as a result of the spiritual darkness. Right? There was no man. Okay? So when Jeremiah says, tohu wabohu, no light, no man, birds fled. What was he talking about? on the land. What was he talking about? The land, the Genesis creation, was not concerned about the planet. It was concerned about the land, the holy land of the people of God, the first people of God. That was what you're reading about in Genesis 1, God preparing land for the first covenant people. Just like for Israel, he prepared the promised land, Canaan, the land of milk and honey. And Israel had to cross through the waters. God separated the waters from the waters. They went through on dry land. And then they had to cross a wilderness. That wilderness is the tohu wabohu that Jeremiah is seeing after the temple was destroyed, meaning it's like a decreation. Things revert back to the way it was in Genesis 1. And it's not talking about the entire planet. It was talking about the condition of the land, the covenant land, the promised land, and the people and the priesthood. That's what it's talking about. Right? So when God said, when Jeremiah said there was no man, the priesthood had fled. There was no priest to mediate. There was no one to give light from God. Okay? When the ancient writers spoke of the eretz, it was in the context of the covenant land. So the tohu wabohu applied to the covenant land. In the time of Genesis 1 and in the time of Jeremiah 4, it's speaking of the condition physically, but more importantly, spiritually, of the covenant people. Right? So Eretz is not speaking about the entire planet. Tohu wabohu, more in terms of its physical application, especially when it's talking about land, it means wilderness. It means land which is not inhabitable for human beings. That's what it means, right? It's a wilderness. But spiritually, it's a spiritual wilderness then, where the knowledge of God, the light of God, the people of God, the temple of God, the priesthood of God is not there. It's absent. Right? It's absent. Let me show you some other, before we close, let me show you some, give you two more examples of the use of the words tohu and bohu, this time individually, right? So Deuteronomy 32 verse 9. Deuteronomy 32 verse 9, because we need to wrap up now. Deuteronomy 32 verse 9. Okay, so we're looking at the use of the word tohu. Okay, Deuteronomy 32 verse 9. And the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob. So we know we're talking about the, so let me read that again. You're in Deuteronomy 32 verses 9 and 10. The Lord's portion is his people, Jacob. Right? Remember, Jacob was the one whose name became Israel. So we're talking about Israel, right? We're talking about the people of God. Notice what God says about his people. He found him, so he found him, Jacob, right? Israel, the people of God. He found the people of God in a desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness, right? This word wilderness, waste, sorry. This word waste is tohu, right? He found Jacob, the people of God, in a desert land and in the howling waste, tohu, of the wilderness. He encircled him, he cared for him, and he kept him as the apple of his eye. You remember Ezekiel chapter 18, I think it is, where God found Jerusalem and she was naked and he covered her with his garment. It's the same thing, but now Jerusalem is Jacob, right? Found him in the wilderness, in the tohu wabohu, right? In a desolate condition. This is speaking here about the formation of Israel. When they went through slavery, 400 years in slavery, they were desolated. Right? And then God now formed his covenant. He covered them with his covenant, with his heavens and earth, as we saw in Hebrews chapter 1. Right? So tohu, here we see tohu is applied literally to a wilderness wasteland, and spiritually that will be the condition, spiritual condition of Israel. And let's look at bohu now, Isaiah 34 verse 8 to 15. Isaiah 34 verse 8. Isaiah 34 verse 8. Look what it says there. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of recompense for the cause of Zion. So we have here a day of judgment, just like 2 Kings 25. That was a day of the Lord. That was a day of vengeance upon Israel. Isaiah here is talking about the same thing. Day of vengeance where? For the cause of Zion. And the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, her soil into sulfur, her land shall become burning pitch, night and day. It shall not be quenched. Its smoke shall go up forever. From generation to generation, it shall lie waste. It shall lie what? Waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. But the hawk and the porcupine shall possess it. The owl and the raven shall dwell in it. He shall stretch the line of confusion over it, and the plumb line of emptiness. So notice, we have emptiness. And the word emptiness there is bohu. Right? So notice, as a result of this judgment that God was talking about here, judgment on, I think it would be Edom, right? Right? Yeah, Bozrah and Edom. As a result of that judgment, the place will become a wilderness, right? Only the wild animals would live there, okay? And it will be empty, not in the sense of some kind of swirling gases floating about in outer space, waiting to be formed into some land, some creation. No, it would be bohu in the sense of nobody lives there except the wild animals. Right? So again, tohu wabohu, it doesn't have this the scientific Big Bang context. It just means nobody lives there. It's a wilderness. It's devoid of human beings in that land, in that region. Okay? That's what tohu. Without form. So what you have, that the translation that you have in your Bible, without form and void, right? It comes from the English modern scientific mindset. But when we see the ancient writers, they use those words and that phrase to describe when the covenant land went through some sort of destruction, whether from war, well, most likely war, right? And the darkness was as a result, physically, of the smokes from the fires covering the sky in that region, not the whole earth. Okay? So in that land, in that region, there was no light. It's darkness. But also, that darkness has a spiritual connotation as well. Right? Spiritual implications concerning the spiritual and covenantal and covenantal relationship that had been broken between God and his people, right? So that's what the tohu wabohu. So that with that understanding, I'm challenging you to revisit the Genesis account and understand that what you're looking at is a wasteland, darkened, overflowing with what, and God is now going to prepare that land for the inhabitation of his people. And that it was a wasteland, not just because there were no people, creatures, and vegetation, but that more importantly, and that it was dark, more importantly, not because that the skies were obscuring the sun, but more importantly, or most importantly, because there were no priests of God. Because the priests were those which brought the light from the heavens. The priests were the birds which flew in the midst of the heavens. Right? I'll just begin looking at it like that. Remember, the apostle says, the creation, the heavens and the earth, was a garment which would grow old and be changed. God wasn't speaking about the natural creation. He wasn't talking about the material shamayim, right? Which is the Hebrew word for the sky. He wasn't talking about the material shamayim. He wasn't talking about the material rakia. He wasn't talking about the material erets. Right? Because all of those would be folded up. The shamayim would be folded up. The rakia would be folded up. The erets would be folded up. So right now we are living in a new shamayim, a new rakia, and a new erets. Think about that. So we will continue next week in our study of the new cosmos. Remember, if you appreciate this content, please like, please share, please subscribe. You may support the ministry by gifting into the ministry, or you may purchase one or both or all three of my books, or you may make a purchase from the merchandise store. The links to all these are in the description below. Until next time, I'm your friend Murray saying, may God richly bless you.
This has been the new Kosmos Videocast. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, and share.